Hey guys, I'm Urizi. This story is all about what if Naruto's body was possessed by the Nine Tails. The Kyuubi takes advantage of a unique opportunity and possesses Naruto's body. Can the demon cope with a mortal's body? What will happen when Naruto resurfaces? Before we proceed with the story, please like and subscribe to this channel if you liked the video, and don't forget to check the description for the other works of the author if you liked the story. Let's start. Chapter 7, The Awakening. Kyuubi jumped from tree to tree, heading back to his normal training area. Although Team 7 had passed the test, Kyuubi could tell that Kakashi had been holding back. The only technique the Jonin had used was whatever had buried Sasuke. Other than that, Kakashi had only used taijutsu. I need to get stronger. I need to be able to defend myself against these humans, because if I am ever found out. He arrived at the training area, stopping in front of the posts that seemed to be in every area. And I still need to buy those weights, and that clothing. But no one will sell to me. I need to find a way. Kyuubi began sprinting to the east edge of the field. If he couldn't use weights yet, then he would just have to run faster. Naruto opened his eyes. It was dark, but he could faintly see the outlines of a hallway lined with doors. Naruto stood up, wiping off the muck that had been on the floor. Just great. Where am I? Naruto looked around. He didn't recognize this place, though it seemed strangely familiar. Then he noticed a light up ahead. Or, rather, a dim orange glow. Is there a fire in here? I don't smell anything. Naruto walked towards the light, which came from around the corner at one end of the hall. The other end was so far away as to be out of sight in this darkness. Naruto pressed himself against the wall and looked around the corner. There was a huge room, which was mostly filled by an almost equally large cage. Inside the cage, Naruto saw a large, glowing figure. He had only seen a painting of it once, in an old history book. He had looked in the book a long time ago, when he was still an obnoxious kid. He only looked because it was in the forbidden part of the library. The caption of the picture had read, Kyuubi no Kitsune. Naruto stared at the giant nine-tailed fox. It seemed to be occupied with something. It stared towards the ceiling, almost like it was looking past it. A long trail of chakra reached out of the cage and around another corner. Naruto stepped out into the open. The fox didn't react. Naruto followed the chakra around the corner. The chakra ended at a large chair, where it gathered in the seat. Naruto walked back to the room with the cage. The fox hadn't moved at all. Naruto looked at the ceiling. There was nothing on it. He looked back at the fox. It was still staring intently at the ceiling, completely ignoring him. Or maybe it just didn't notice him. Naruto looked back up. He tried to focus past the ceiling. He felt a strange sensation, like he was expanding beyond the walls of the place. The room vanished. He saw trees rushing past him. He saw his hands pump at his sides, and heard his ragged breathing. But he felt nothing. He wasn't trying to run. He tried to look down at his body, but his head wouldn't move. His body kept running until it reached a large tree. His hand reached out and touched the tree, and then his body turned and began running the other way. He could tell from the sound of his breathing that he should be dead tired. But he didn't feel tired. He could tell when he saw the trees move that he should feel a breeze. But he didn't. It was like something else was controlling his body. He tried to pull back into the place he had been before, and he felt a strange constriction, like he was being pushed into a box too small to fit him. Suddenly he was back in the giant room with the cage. He looked at the fox demon, Kyuubi. It still stared at the ceiling with the same intensity. Kyuubi is controlling the body. But if I'm not in my body, where am I? Naruto looked past the ceiling again. His body was still running. What was he to do? He didn't mind watching life this way. In fact, it might be preferable to actually living it. If something or someone showed up, and he didn't want to listen to their hurtful remarks, he could go back to the strange room. This is going to be really boring if all Kyuubi, at least, I think it's Kyuubi, does is run. Trees continued to rush by him. Naruto sighed. At least, he sighed as much as you can when you don't have a body, anyway. Kyuubi spun around, drawing a kunai. Someone was here, watching him. He had heard their breathing, but for some reason, he couldn't tell where it had come from. He sniffed the air. Nothing. He listened intently. Nothing. He couldn't sense anything, even with his enhanced senses. But a skilled ninja might be able to hide the signs of their presence. Why'd he stop all of a sudden? At the sound of the voice, Kyuubi dodged to the side and turned to face the other way. No one was there. And again, he couldn't tell where the sound had come from. Who's there? He asked the air. Silence settled over the training area. Kyuubi heard what sounded like a whistle, and hurled a kunai at the sound. A small bird, skewered by the blade, fell to the ground, guilty only of trying to sing. Kyuubi tensed his muscles, waiting for any hint of another presence. No one could stay silent forever. Naruto realized what was going on. He may not have been the brightest ninja, but he saw that every time he tried to make a sound, Kyuubi reacted. Maybe Kyuubi could hear him. He decided to test this theory. This is way better than dealing with the villagers. Naruto frowned, realizing that what he really wanted was to be friends with Kyuubi. It may be better than no friends, but, a demon? Man, my life sucks. Hello, Kyuubi. Kyuubi flinched. How could anyone have figured it out? He looked around wildly, but saw no one. Can't you figure it out? Doesn't my voice sound familiar? It did sound somewhat familiar, but Kyuubi couldn't think of anyone. Who are you? He asked. Then it hit him. His voice is exactly the same as mine. Meaning? Naruto? In the flesh? Well, not really, but you get the picture. This could be useful, thought Kyuubi. Naruto can help me to act convincingly human. Unless he tries to take back control of the body. I have hardly any grip on my control at all, since I have to reach way out of the seal to get to the point of control. If he decides to take control, I will be trapped back there again. What can I say to convince him to leave the chair alone? Maybe, if I... You do realize I can hear all of that, right? You can hear my thoughts? Yes. Then I guess all I can do is ask you to let me use your body? Yeah. So, can I? Kyuubi hoped for the impossible. Maybe this kid would go back into a coma or whatever. Maybe he would. Yeah. I like this arrangement better anyway. Did I hear you correctly? Kyuubi could hardly believe that he could have such good luck. Did you just say what I think you said? Yes, I did. Everyone hates me, so I don't really want to go out there anymore. Besides, you haven't done anything too bad yet, and it's been... How long have I been gone? 3 days. Ah. And before you ask, I can help you get your human act down, if you like. Not that I'm probably the best human to ask, but I can't really ask anyone else. Yeah. And Naruto? Is there any way that I can buy things? I need to buy some weights and clothing that isn't orange. What's wrong with orange? What do you mean, what's wrong with orange? Any competent ninja would be practically blinded by it before I could sneak up on them. Oh. How did you act when you tried to buy the stuff? Like any other customer. I tried to walk in, and the owners freaked out and told me to go away, so I told them to shove off, and they decided that warranted attacking me, and, yeah. That won't work. If anything, you basically need to grovel, and offer to pay extra. I've never actually bought anything but ramen, and I only bought that from Ichiraku. The owner there seemed to like me, so. Grovel. You expect the great demon, Kyuubi no Kitsune, to grovel for clothing and hunks of heavy metal. Yeah. Unless you want me to try it. I could control the body and do it for you. Kyuubi considered that for a second. Would you be able to relinquish control of the body after doing that? I don't know. I don't really know how I got here in the first place. There's only one way to find out, though. Kyuubi thought about that. Was he willing to risk his only chance at freedom to spare his pride? It's not worth it. I can't. Then Kyuubi visualized himself groveling before filthy shopkeepers to be able to buy their goods at an inflated cost. Scratch that. We'll try it. It's a little afternoon right now. Why don't we go now? You'll need to go sit in that chair to control the body. What are we going to do about money, Kyuubi? I never had much, and certainly not enough to buy good weights and clothing. I've already got that taken care of. Just go sit in the chair before I start doubting my decision. Naruto returned to the room with the cage, which he now thought to be his mind. He walked around the corner to the chair. As he awaked this time, the reddish-orange chakra pulled back. Naruto sat in the chair. Nothing happened. What is wrong? Why isn't anything happening? Then Naruto thought of something. He tried to focus past the ceiling. He experienced the strange feeling of expansion as he returned to the real world. Naruto sat up, rubbing his head. When Kyuubi had relinquished control, the body had fallen onto the ground and the head had hit a rock. Why am I thinking of my head as the head? Whatever. We need to work on that transition if we ever have to do that again, kid. If I can let you control the body again. Don't remind me. Now get moving. I have to train this body to avoid getting killed by any stupid ninja. Where's the money you were talking about? It's under the mattress of your bed. And maybe you should buy several different levels of weights, so that we can increase the weight as our body becomes stronger. Naruto smiled slightly. Maybe he would have a friend after all. Even if it was a demon. Chapter 8, Purchases. Naruto walked along as the morning sun shone from behind him. It felt weird to wander around Konoha now. Although he was still as alive as he had ever been, he felt more at home in the dark hallways of his mind than he did out here. It was hard to act normal. Especially after hearing about how he had gotten a nine-tailed demon fox sealed into him. Kyuubi had graciously explained how the whole thing happened, although he had refused to say anything about why he had attacked Konoha in the first place. Given all that had happened to him recently, that he was able to act normal was almost a miracle. Especially with Kyuubi talking to him while he walked. Like I was saying, kid, we need to get several different levels of weights, and a few black outfits, at least. That way we'll have a good chance of sneaking up on people when we're on missions. Yes, you've told me all this already. Once Naruto had figured out how to talk to Kyuubi from within his mind, it was not at all hard to learn how to do it while out here. And what's with the we? I think I'm going to be hanging out in that place most of the time, so. Yes, but if we ever need to act really convincingly human, you'll need to come out. And so you'll need to train also, so that we won't be sitting ducks whenever we are acting. And there may be other situations where we may have to switch places for a time. So it will be we. Ah. Naruto walked through the streets of Konoha, looking for a good place to buy clothing. He knew where they would buy the weights, if the owner could be convinced to sell them. Seeing a likely store, Naruto walked towards it, but then remembered the scene that Kyuubi had made here yesterday. He would have to find another place to buy the clothing. Seeing another clothing store, he walked in. Hey, what do you think you're doing here, kid? Did I say you could come in? The store's owner yelled from behind the counter, startling the customers in line. I'm very sorry, sir. I only need to buy some clothing. I did not mean to disturb you. I am willing to pay extra for inconveniencing you. Kyuubi watched from his cage as Naruto apologized and groveled. It's a good thing I let him do the talking. I wouldn't let anyone talk to me that way. He continued to watch as Naruto bargained with the shopkeeper, who agreed to let him shop if Naruto would pay double price for everything. When the kid finally began looking through the racks of clothing, Kyuubi began pointing out the clothes that they wanted to buy. 3 pairs of those black pants. 2 pairs of black boots. 3 or 4 of those black long-sleeved shirts. Yes, everything needs to be black. No, I don't think we'll ever need to hide in anything that is a vibrant orange. No, I don't think orange would intimidate them. They would just think you're stupid. Get 2 pairs of those black leather gloves. And 2 black vests. And 3 of those black head coverings. I know they don't look like masks. You have to wrap them around your head. That way only your eyes show. That way you won't have to waste chakra on that jutsu I used to get the money. What jutsu? I'll tell you about it later. What? You dare accuse me of being a petty thief? And get 2 black cloaks while you're at it. No, they aren't terribly useful in a fight, but if it's wet or cold, you might need them. What do you mean by that? You don't even know what your mother sounded like, how could you know that I sound like her? Just go buy the stupid clothes. We've gotten everything we needed here, I think. Kyuubi remained quiet while Naruto bought the clothing. The shopkeeper glared daggers at Naruto, but wasn't going to pass up the profits from double pricing the clothes. Naruto placed the clothes on his bed. Now he was supposed to buy weights. At least Kyuubi hadn't tried to buy them yesterday. What do you mean by that, kid? Naruto almost laughed. He hadn't had any friends before, and Kyuubi wasn't the ideal type, and probably only cooperated because he was afraid of losing the body, but a friend was a friend. Naruto was happier than he could recall being in a long time. As he walked along the road, he mused on his former life. Everyone hated him. He couldn't blame them, really. They had lost so much to Kyuubi, and so when it was sealed in him, they just assumed that he was Kyuubi. He walked into the blacksmith's shop to buy some weights. Kyuubi watched as Naruto groveled with the blacksmith. He watched as the blacksmith eventually agreed to make the weights, provided Naruto paid triple the price. The smith told Naruto to come back the next day for the first set, and a week after that for the rest of them. Naruto handed over the money and walked out of the shop. You didn't have to pay that much, Naruto. They were expensive enough as it was. He wouldn't have agreed to sell it all if I hadn't agreed to pay that much. Whatever. When they arrived back at Naruto's house, Naruto set the weights onto the bed. I'm not sure if I can do this, but here goes nothing. Naruto concentrated on returning to the darkened room. His bedroom became blurry, and he felt like he was being crushed by gravity, but with no pain. When his vision cleared, he found himself in the dark room, still sitting on the strange throne. He got up, and a mass of orange-red chakra moved to fill in the seat of the chair. He was back. Kyuubi withdrew back into the cage, and felt around the corner with his chakra. When Naruto rose from the chair, Kyuubi quickly took control. He filled the seat with his chakra, and looked beyond his prison, into the world of mortals. He was back. Chapter 9, The C-Class Mission. Kyuubi was pleased with the progress he had made in his training. Once he had picked up the first set of weights, he had begun using them immediately, and now the results were showing in his practice sessions with himself and his shadow clones. He had the extra weights at home, and it was about time to switch to the second set. Kyuubi was already about twice as fast as before. Granted, it was because he spent almost every waking hour performing techniques while sprinting through the forest, and he only had to let this body recuperate a few hours a day. The body's chakra capacity was improving, though not as fast as Kyuubi would have liked. And he was learning human customs from Naruto, who seemed almost pathetically nice to the demon. I guess he really was lonely. Kyuubi walked towards the Hokage's office to meet with his team. They were supposed to be getting another mission today. With any luck, it will be an easy one like finding that stupid cat. Then I can get back to training. Before entering the office, he instinctively checked the genjutsu on his eyes. Still there, and it felt fine. Kyuubi walked into the office. Naruto. You're an hour late. Don't you care at all? Sakura screamed at him. Kyuubi looked around. Kakashi isn't here yet, so why is she getting so worked up? Females. About 15 minutes later. The door opened, and Kakashi slouched into the room. Sorry guys, but there was an old lady who needed help carrying some groceries, and dash. No there wasn't he. You lousy dash. Ahem. Sakura glanced over at the Hokage, who was looking at her with an amused smile. I'm sorry, Hokage-sama. It's fine. Team 7, now that you are all here, the Sandaime glanced pointedly at Kakashi, I can give you your mission. Due to a lack of requests for missions lately, you will be getting a C-ranked mission. Sasuke smirked. Now I can test my skills against other ninja. Then I will know how much more I need to train to kill Itachi. Sakura smiled, happy to get a mission that didn't involve retrieving cats. Inner Sakura ranted on about impressing Sasuke. Kyuubi frowned. This probably means that the mission will take more than a few hours. I need to train. I need to be able to defend myself, and stay alive. Sarutobi continued, you are to escort a man, Tajuna, to Wave Country. You will be protecting him from bandits and highwaymen. Once you arrive, you will continue to guard him until a project he is working on is complete. You will be protecting him from bandits and thugs while you are there. You may return once his project is complete, or after staying there for a month. Tajuna will be taking care of your meals. You will be leaving tomorrow morning. Dismissed. Team 7 waited by the gates for Tajuna. Even Kakashi had only been 5 minutes late. Kyuubi was unhappy about the mission. I need to train. At least we only have to worry about bandits and such. But it takes away from my training time. At least I can train on my speed and endurance while we're out there. Kyuubi felt himself to make sure that the second set of weights was firmly in place. Naruto had said that Kyuubi could train on speed and endurance by acting hyper and running around, because no one on the team knew about the weights. It would make him look silly, but at least he could train. He watched a man dressed in shabby clothes approach. The man was drinking from a bottle as he walked. He walked up to them, but instead of passing, he stopped. Are you guys ready to go? The man asked. Yes, Kakashi said. Let's go. Kyuubi frowned. We have to escort this guy? How on earth could he afford a C-ranked mission? Kyuubi followed behind Kakashi and the man who must be Tajuna. This was going to be a long mission. Kyuubi ran in circles around the group. He ran into the forest and back out. He jumped over Kakashi and Sasuke. After the first hour of this, Tajuna and the rest of Team 7 just ignored him. The dead last must be excited about the mission, thought Sasuke. They walked along, Kakashi and Tajuna talking about the project Tajuna was working on, a giant bridge. They passed a puddle. Kyuubi stopped. He smelled something. What is that smell? It smells like there was a person, no, 2 people here just a few minutes ago. And I smell metal, like the stuff they use in kunai. Ninja? Maybe we aren't the only people out on a mission. Kyuubi ran to catch up with the group, splashing through the puddle in his hurry. 2 shapes silently rose from the puddle. The first clutched his head, and muttered curses. Then they both silently followed Team 7. Kyuubi was sprinting around and around the group, when he saw the 2 figures creeping up behind them. He ran towards Kakashi, and whispered, 2 behind, before continuing to sprint around Team 7 like nothing was the matter. Kakashi was pleasantly surprised that Naruto had noticed the stalkers. Although Kakashi had noticed the puddle that should not have been there due to a lack of rain, he had not known exactly how many there were. Maybe Naruto isn't as shallow as I thought. Aren't you excited to be on a C-class mission, Sasuke? Sakura asked. Sasuke said nothing. Sakura pouted, while inner Sakura yelled that true love would conquer all barriers. Suddenly, 2 cloaked men appeared on either side of Kakashi and wrapped spiked chains around him. They both pulled, ripping the Jonin into shreds. Then they charged at Tajuna and the 2 genin. Kyuubi was running around in the forest. Sasuke drew a kunai for each hand, and dropped into a crouch. The cloaked men flung their chains around the genin, hoping to catch them inside. Sakura grabbed Tajuna and got both of them out of the way, while Sasuke leapt straight at their assailants. The 2 men fought Sasuke for a while, dodging kunai and swinging their spiked chains and gauntlets. They couldn't touch Sasuke, but neither could Sasuke touch them. Suddenly Sasuke jumped back, rapidly forming seals. He put his hand to his mouth and blew a large fireball at the cloaked men. When he stopped, Sasuke saw nothing but scorched ground. The 2 men dropped from above him, landing on either side of him. Their chains were held ready. Sasuke braced himself for the end. Then he saw a crowd of Narutos pour out of the forest from every direction. The men flung their chains out to intercept the attack, but there were too many to stop. Sasuke, seeing their distraction, stabbed them both in the back with his kunai. Then the men were knocked back into a large tree by flying punches by 2 Naruto clones. Before they could leave, they heard a chillingly cheerful voice say, "Did you just hurt Sasuke-kun?" Sakura wailed on the 2 men senseless until Kakashi stepped out of the trees and said, "That's enough, Sakura." Kakashi-sensei. You're alive. Sakura squealed. Obviously. Sakura face faulted. You guys did well. Naruto, good job with the sneak attack. Sasuke, you took advantage of Naruto's attack very well. Sakura, you knocked them unconscious for us. Good job, everyone. Tajuna, Kakashi turned to face the sheepish bridge builder. You have some explaining to do. Chapter 10, Zabuza, Demon of the Mist. Kakashi sighed. Yesterday, Tajuna had admitted, after a few glares, that he had known that there might be ninja after him, but that his village could not afford a Class B mission, so the deception had been necessary. Kakashi had decided to proceed with the mission, after Tajuna guilted him into it by saying that they could leave a poor old man to fend for himself if they wished. Kakashi sighed again. It was bad enough that they had to be on the lookout for ninja, but did Naruto plan to run around like a squirrel on speed for the entire mission? To be sure, it could possibly prevent an ambush. But more likely, Naruto would be ambushed while he sprinted around in the woods. Then again, Kakashi didn't want Naruto to go back to running in circles around the group. Not only was it annoying, but Naruto kicked up dust, so that there was always a cloud of dust around them. And it disturbed Tajuna, who thought that no normal kid should have that much energy. Naruto. Said boy rushed from the forest and stopped next to Kakashi. He fell into step with the Jonin, asking, "What is it, Kakashi-sensei?" Naruto, I know that this may be boring, and that you might have excess energy, but you need to contain yourself. We might need that energy should we run into any more ninja. But Kakashi-sensei dash. No buts. Just stop. Kyuubi was pissed. Not only was he on an extra long mission where he might run into people who might be able to kill him, but he wasn't allowed to train, either. You know, you sounded like a whiny brat back there. And he had to put up with sarcastic comments from his host, who seemed more cheerful than Kyuubi could remember. I am a demon, not some human you can joke about. If I had my body, I would rip you limb from limb. There wouldn't be enough of you left to fill a jewelry box. Kyuubi and Naruto had gotten used to each other, more or less. Naruto would offer advice on human things, and pointed out things that Kyuubi may have overlooked. Kyuubi had never learned how to read emotions from tones and expressions, and, though he saw little point in it, agreed to listen to whatever advice Naruto thought of from time to time. They were working on a system to work together in combat. Kyuubi would pay attention to a single target, while Naruto would watch the surroundings from his vantage in his own mind. They had only tested it out once, during the short time they had engaged the Demon Brothers. And, for anyone who doesn't know, those were the two ninja from the last chapter. It seemed to work okay, but they would keep training, if they ever got the chance. When there was nothing to do, as seemed to happen often on this mission, Naruto would tease Kyuubi, who would respond with venom. This seemed to amuse Naruto, who would continue teasing. Kyuubi didn't actually mind Naruto so much, and usually responded only to try and defend his dignity as a powerful demon. But you don't have a body, do you? You have to borrow mine. Step inside my cage, and then we'll see if you still have your annoying sense of humor. Actually, I'm just fine from out here. Get down. Kyuubi crouched low to the ground as a huge sword flew overhead and embedded itself into a tree on the other side of the clearing. A man jumped onto the sword. He was dressed in light blue, baggy pants, dark brown shoes, and wrapping around his hands and lower face. Kakashi was fully alert, though he didn't betray his anxiety on the outside. Zabuza, Demon of the Mist. The Genin and Tajuna stood up. Who's Zabuza? Sakura asked. He's a missing nin from the hidden mist. You three, guard Tajuna. I'll handle Zabuza. How noble. The great copy nin will protect his brats. Suddenly Zabuza appeared next to Tajuna. We're still not fast enough. We've been training this whole time and I can't even see him move. This whole time hasn't even been 2 weeks. Good grief. Try and protect them from this. Zabuza swung his sword. Or tried to, only to discover that Kakashi was holding onto it. Sakura pulled Tajuna away while Sasuke and Kyuubi took positions around Kakashi and Zabuza. The Genin watched in awe as the two fought, seemingly tireless. Zabuza kept swinging his mammoth sword like it had no weight, but Kakashi always dodged it like the sword was moving through molasses. Kakashi lashed out with kunai, which were either blocked with the sword, or wasted on a water clone. Neither could land a good blow on the other. Suddenly, Zabuza leapt onto a tree branch. I'll let you go this time, but that bridge will not be built. If you continue, I won't go so easy on you next time. Zabuza rushed into the nearby forest. The group arrived at Tajuna's house without further incident, late the next evening. They ate with Tajuna, his daughter, Tsunami, and, for a time, her son, Inari. Inari stormed off in the middle of the meal, declaring that they were all going to die. After Sasuke refused to go for a walk with her, Sakura retired for the night. Sasuke went to bed soon after. Kyuubi went to his cot and listened to the sounds in the house. When he was sure that everyone was asleep, he snuck out of the house to train. Because he had missed out on training in the last 2 days, he decided to do things a little different. Fighting shadow clones while sprinting through the forest. It would have to be taijutsu only, because the sound of techniques or the clang of kunai might have been heard back in the house. Kyuubi trained until the horizon began to light up. He hurried back to the house, and feigned sleep until Sasuke came to wake him. Hey Dobe, get up. We have to guard Tajuna at the bridge today. Kyuubi sprinted around the bridge. Sasuke had, in vain, tried to convince him to lie in hiding and watch for the Zabuza. In the end, Sasuke took it upon himself to watch around the shore, leaving Naruto to guard the edge of the bridge. Hours passed. The two genin ate lunch together in silence, before returning to their posts. A fog began to creep around the bridge. Sasuke thought nothing of it until he heard a man laughing right behind him. Kakashi can't protect you now, brat. Naruto was sprinting around the edge of the bridge in the mist when he heard someone land beside him, and saw a dark shape keeping pace with him as he ran. He stopped and faced the figure. I do not wish to hurt you, but Zabuza-san cannot allow this bridge to be finished. Chapter 11, Battle on the Bridge. Sasuke spun around. There stood Zabuza, the demon of the mist. Kakashi was at Tajuna's house working with Sakura on some training exercise. Naruto was on the other end of the bridge. I can't lose to him, thought Sasuke. I must survive, so that I can avenge my clan. If I am to beat my brother, I have to be able to beat this guy. Zabuza formed a seal which Sasuke couldn't identify through the mist, and vanished. Sasuke whirled around. Nothing. He looked behind him. Nothing. Where is he? I can't let him catch me off guard. I have to be ready. But no matter where he looked, Sasuke could find no trace of the mist nin. This was going to be difficult. Kyuubi looked at the strange boy. Or is it a girl? The nin just stared back. Neither of them moved. The nin, Haku, tensed his muscles. At any moment, the boy would either spring to attack or to run away. If the boy ran away, that was fine. But if he attacked, then... Are you a boy or a girl? Haku flinched. Everywhere he went, people had the nerve to question his manliness. He would show up and knock people around, and no one ever asked, how did you get so strong, or, where did you learn to do that? It was always, are you really a man? Are you a boy or a girl? He hated that. This kid was not getting away. Haku wasn't going to kill the boy, but he would make him suffer for asking such a dumb question. Kyuubi mentally smiled. The kid had been right. Of course I was right. I'm the human here. I would know. Kyuubi ignored the voices in his head for now. He had distracted the nin with his innocent-sounding jab, and now he could attack. Kyuubi lashed out with a spray of kunai. The nin, though distracted, dodged the projectiles at a speed Kyuubi could barely see. Oh. That can't be good. Kyuubi twisted around just in time to see the nin fling a handful of senbon in his direction from behind. Kyuubi dodged them, but with considerably less grace than the mist nin had shown. Kyuubi jumped at the nin, who almost lazily moved out of the way and stuck several of the needles into his back. The demon blocked out the pain, and the voice of the annoying human in the back of his mind. Kyuubi formed a familiar seal, and a dozen clones appeared. Immediately, they ran straight at the gender-impaired nin, each holding kunai in both hands. The nin fired senbon in a circle around himself/herself, dispelling all the clones before they could reach him/her. Kyuubi, who had not attacked, frowned. This could be harder than I had thought. Again ignoring the voice in his head, which was yelling about something, Kyuubi summoned another dozen clones to the battleground. These clones flung kunai from a range, but Haku dodged them with an eerie grace, and quickly dispatched all of them. Kyuubi realized that this opponent was fast. Apparently, the demon was not near where he needed to be in terms of speed. It was only when the nin charged at him, flinging senbon, that Naruto's voice registered in his mind. "You idiot! Take off your weights." Sasuke panted for breath. Every time he thought he had gotten the upper hand, his target would dissolve into water. Just how many water clones could a guy make? Apparently a lot, thought Sasuke as he snatched kunai out of yet another melting clone. He had to salvage kunai from fallen clones and from the deck of the bridge, as he had run out a while ago. Sasuke had the distinct impression that Zabuza was playing with him. Sasuke dodged to the side, barely avoiding being chopped in half by that monstrous sword. He stabbed his assailant in the back, and was not surprised when it, too, dissolved into a puddle. Sasuke couldn't keep this up for much longer. As if he had read Sasuke's mind, Zabuza attacked anew, with 4 images of himself converging on Sasuke's position, one from every side. Sasuke threw his Remaing 3 kunai at 3 of the images, and leapt into the air, hoping to get out of the range of the swords. One image was struck in the shoulder, and splattered onto the deck. But the other 3 jumped after him. Sasuke pulled out his only remaining weapon, his Fuma Shuriken, and turned around, preparing to block the swords with it. Instead, another image, perhaps the real Zabuza, appeared behind him and slapped Sasuke across the bridge with the flat of his blade. Sasuke landed hard and rolled to the small wall at the edge of the bridge. He couldn't move his legs, and he couldn't move his arms without excruciating pain shooting through his back. He had no idea where his shuriken had landed. He could only watch as Zabuza walked toward him out of the mist, holding that massive sword on one shoulder. "I was holding out for your teacher to show up. I was really looking forward to a rematch. I thought our session here would attract his attention. But since it obviously didn't, perhaps your death will succeed where this pointless fight did not." Zabuza raised his sword. Sasuke braced for the end. Kyuubi was kicked across the bridge. He had been too surprised by Naruto's comment to react in time. "How could I forget about the weights? Of course. I knew I should be faster than this." Kyuubi dropped his weights onto the ground by undoing the rope that held them on. He had specifically designed his weights so that he could take them all off by untying a single knot. That way, he could take them off in the middle of a fight. Like now. The weights landed with a loud metallic clanging, chipping bits of the concrete. Kyuubi suddenly realized that those weights had been heavy. He felt like he needed to grip the ground to keep from floating away. Pulling out a kunai, he charged at Haku. The Mist Nin dodged Kyuubi's slash, but only by inches, and without the usual flourish. Kyuubi schemed across the surface of the bridge, running after his gender-neutral opponent. Haku stopped and turned around. Now that he was out of the boy's reach, he needed to make a plan. Haku's train of thought was interrupted by a fist crushing his mask into his face. Haku fell back several feet. Then he remembered what Zabuza-san had said. "If your opponent is tough, kill him. Otherwise we'll have to fight him again. Don't be so soft that you endanger our safety." Kyuubi saw the boy get up and form a strange seal, one that he did not recognize. Water from the bridge rose up and froze in long, flat sheets around him. Then he saw Haku jump into one of the mirror-like sheets of ice. Suddenly, every sheet around him showed an image of Haku. Kyuubi smirked, throwing a kunai into the mirror that Haku had entered. It shattered. But immediately, more water rose up and made another sheet of ice, complete with an image of Haku. Kyuubi saw all of the images raise hands full of senbon. The images threw the needles. Kyuubi saw needles fly from seemingly every direction. He knew that there could only be one of the nin. And he could occasionally make out a faint blur that must have been the nin. But it was too much to think about at the moment. Kyuubi covered his head as senbon rained down upon him. They kept coming and coming. Kyuubi realized from the chill spreading from the many needles embedded in him that they were made out of ice. Which the nin probably made from the water around them. And since they were out on the ocean right now, Kyuubi began to grow tired. He didn't feel exhausted. He felt a peaceful sort of sleepiness. The needles didn't hurt as much. The edges of his vision began to darken. I wonder what's going on, Kyuubi mused. He didn't really care. He just wanted to sleep. Kyuubi. You're dying. Snap out of it. Oh. How nice. I guess that. What? Kyuubi forced as much of his own chakra into Naruto's body as the body could take for the few minutes he would need it. The sudden release of so much energy made the concrete of the bridge ripple and crack around his feet. Senbon popped out of his skin, and all of his wounds healed without so much as a mark to show their former existence. The genjutsu over his eyes broke, revealing the bloodshot eyes with slitted pupils and red-orange irises. The whisker marking on his cheeks lengthened and thickened, giving the impression of long claw marks across his face. Fiery, red-orange chakra enveloped his body. The chakra formed a vaguely fox-shaped silhouette around Naruto's body. Over each hand were claws made of chakra. Haku could only stare as the blonde boy suddenly healed. He could only stand there as the boy charged, screaming incoherently. He could only fall as the ferocious thing ripped out his throat. And he could only scream silently as the boy began to eat him alive. Chapter 12, Gato. I was holding out for your teacher to show up. I was really looking forward to a rematch. I thought our session here would attract his attention. But since it obviously didn't, perhaps your death will succeed where this pointless fight did not. Zabuza raised his sword. Sasuke braced for the end. He heard a gasp of pain, but it sounded like it was coming from in front of him. Is this what death is like? Sasuke opened his eyes. In front of him stood Zabuza, still holding his sword above him. An arm stuck out from where his heart should have been. The hand glowed bright blue with chakra. Suddenly, the hand receded. Zabuza's now lifeless body collapsed to the ground. The monstrous sword fell to the side. And just behind Zabuza's body stood Hatake Kakashi. Kakashi smiled his little smile, which you can only recognize from the way his eye looks. Sorry I'm late. For real, this time. I shouldn't have let you and Naruto guard the bridge by yourselves. Sasuke grunted in response. I need to go check on how Naruto's doing. Sakura will take care of you until I bring Naruto back here. Sasuke-kun. You're hurt. Sakura ran over and kneeled beside Sasuke, as Kakashi hurried to the end of the bridge. Saki groaned as Sakura began fussing over him. Must replenish energy. Must feed. Kyuubi tore into the still warm body of the fallen Haku. Kyuubi. Stop. The demon ignored Naruto's request. Kyuubi, I know you might be a little shaken by your first real brush with death, but if someone sees you, they might figure out what's going on. Kyuubi froze. Slowly, his thoughts returned to normal. What if someone did see him? Kyuubi stood up and slowed the release of his chakra back to its normal level. He replaced the genjutsu over his eyes. He pulled his mask back over his face, as it had obviously been removed for eating. Then he sat down. I almost died. And if that kid hadn't reminded me, I might have been seen, and then I would be hunted by ninja, instead of just running into them on missions. You could say thank you. Thank you. Naruto. We should probably go check on Sasuke. Zabuza is at least as strong as this guy was. Yeah. I guess so. Kyuubi reluctantly got up and jogged over toward where Sasuke had been patrolling. Kakashi ran toward the end of the bridge. Zabuza would only have strong companions, and any ninja dumb enough to wear orange, at least, he used to wear orange, would be easy prey for a decent ninja. Then, Kakashi saw Naruto jogging his way. Naruto. The boy stopped. Kakashi looked at him. There was blood everywhere. Blood covered Naruto's black shirt, pants, and mask. It was dripping off of his chin, and from his fingertips. Every step left a red print on the ground. Naruto's entire outfit was now a dark red. His clothing was torn, and had more than a dozen holes in various places. Naruto. Are you alright? Kakashi rushed to make sure that Naruto would be alright. Surely, with this much blood lost, the boy should be about to pass out. I'm fine, Kakashi-sensei, Naruto replied in a gravelly voice. Kakashi sighed in relief. He had been afraid of losing a student on his very first mission as a sensei. Where is the nin you fought? Naruto pointed behind him. You didn't let him get away. Naruto shook his head in a negative manner. Very good, Naruto. Now let's see if we can't find out who was behind all this. Maybe there is a note on the ninja's body. If not, we can look at Zabuza's. You don't want to see the body, Kyuubi said. Because of the recent release of so much chakra, it was going to be more difficult to speak normally for a while. We have to find out who was behind this, or this mission will have to continue until the bridge is finished. Kyuubi grunted, but didn't argue. Kakashi began walking over in the direction Naruto had pointed. Come on, Naruto. Naruto followed slowly behind Kakashi, dreading what the Jonin might discover. Sakura finished binding Sasuke's last open wound. How are you feeling, Sasuke-kun? She asked in a syrupy voice. Sasuke grunted in response. Sakura was about to speak when she heard many people walking toward her. She looked up, and saw a short man in a black suit, leading a large crowd of armed men. The man stopped when he saw her through the slowly clearing mist, and the men stopped behind him. The man spoke. Well. What have we here? A girl and a wounded ninja? Ha! Even if that stupid demon couldn't kill you, at least he weakened you for my men to finish off. He pointed at the people on his left. You men take care of these two. The rest of you, search the rest of the bridge. When you kill everyone there, plant the explosives. The men he had finished speaking to hurried toward the end of the bridge. The man in the black suit stood where he was, and spoke to the rest of his men, who were walking over to Sakura. Kill the boy. And do whatever you want with the girl. I want to see this. Kakashi stared in horror at the sight in front of him. Two wild dogs were busily eating the ninja's corpse. By the looks of it, they had already eaten the throat and the face, and were polishing off the right side of the body. Kyuubi silently vowed to be nice to every dog he ever met again. Naruto agreed. That's twice you've been saved by wild dogs. You owe them big time. Meanwhile, Kakashi was wondering how the dogs had gotten there. After another glance, he decided that there was not going to be anything salvageable from the ninja's body. He turned around and began walking the other way, when he heard Sakura scream. Kyuubi turned at the sound. But before Kakashi could sprint to Sakura's aid, a small crowd of armed men came into view from the thin wisps of mist still hanging over the bridge. You're not going anywhere! Shouted one, and they all charged at Kakashi and Kyuubi. Chapter 13, The Bridge Completed. The men ran as fast as they could straight at Kakashi and Kyuubi. Kakashi turned to Kyuubi. Naruto, you need to take care of yourself. Sasuke is seriously injured, and I don't think Sakura is well equipped for fighting, let alone protecting herself and someone else. I'm going to help her. I'll be back as soon as I can. Take care of yourself. With that, Kakashi leapt over the crowd of men and continued toward the other end of the bridge. The men ignored this and instead focused on the remaining ninja, Kyuubi. Kuso. I can't use my power again so soon. It would tear this body to shreds. I need time to heal. Then just use what you've learned of ninja techniques. That goes without saying, mortal. Don't call me mortal, or I won't let you. Kyuubi ignored the rest of whatever Naruto was saying in order to concentrate on the challenge before him. From the way they ran, it was obvious that none of them were ninja, or had even the slightest bit of training. Maybe this won't be as bad as I thought. Kyuubi flung a kunai at a man's unprotected forehead. The thug tried to dodge, and ended up taking it in his right eye, instead. His momentum clung his body onto its stomach, and the two men immediately behind him tripped on his corpse. Kyuubi lashed out with several more kunai, and though most found their targets, only a few killed or incapacitated their victims. Kyuubi held onto the kunai in his left hand, and put out his right in front of him. When the first thug reached him, Kyuubi grabbed the man's shoulder and used it to push himself into the air. Once he was airborne, he spun around and kicked the men nearby. Landing in the newly made clearing in the crowd, Kyuubi leapt and slashed his kunai across the throat of a man still off balance from the kick. Kyuubi spun around to slash another man, but was blocked by a sword. Some of them are armed. Seeing that the edges of the blade were not very sharp, Kyuubi grabbed the sword, and held it still while he slit its owner's throat. The hand that he had put on the sword bled slightly, but Kyuubi paid it no mind. It wasn't as if he wasn't drenched in it from his last fight. Kyuubi slashed, grabbed, spun, and stabbed. Then he stopped. The 4 men remaining from the crowd of perhaps 24 stood about 10 feet behind Kyuubi. To be sure, Kyuubi was not uninjured, but compared to the carnage around him, he had relatively few and minor injuries. A stray punch had knocked his mask from its place over his lower face. As he slowly turned to face the remaining men, their eyes widened at the sight of his face. After the first few seconds, Kyuubi had begun enjoying the fight. Or maybe it would be better termed slaughter. This showed in the expression on his face, the expression that terrified the 4 men. His mouth was contorted in a maniacal grin, and although the genjutsu on his eyes was still in place, they looked hardly less fierce than they could have without it. The men ran. The men couldn't be blamed. They had just been scared out of their minds. So when they saw the second masked ninja look at them, it wasn't their fault that they panicked. They simply saw the bodies around the second ninja, and, not knowing that the bodies were unconscious but living people, they assumed the worst. So when the ninja looked at them, they did what seemed to be the only logical thing to do, and jumped off of the bridge. Kakashi was slightly confused. These men were supposed to be hardened thugs. So there was no reason for them to jump over the edge of the bridge. Maybe the unconscious people around me frightened them. Kakashi looked one last time to make sure that Sakura and Sasuke would be alright, and hurried to help Naruto. As he ran towards the unfinished end of the bridge, a strong gust of wind came and blew the remaining mist away, revealing to Kakashi the reason for the thugs' panic. The entire end of the bridge was covered in blood, which was slowly draining off the bridge through the ducts made to divert rainwater. There were bodies strewn across the bridge, lying in unnatural poses with gruesome expressions on their faces. And in the middle of it all, Kakashi saw Naruto. The boy stood facing him, mask on, and an unreadable expression in his eyes. The formerly black clothes were now a dark red, with a few cuts and nicks that had been added since Kakashi last saw them. Kyuubi walked over to Kakashi. Mission completed. Kakashi mused over the mission as he and his team made their way back toward Konoha. Tajuna had been relatively unfazed by the bloodshed, and had mentioned that it was about what Gato had done several years ago. The 4 men had been located. 3 of them had drowned, and the 4th had tried to kill those who found him the moment they came into view, and so had been killed. The bridge had been completed, and the only signs of the fight were a few minuscule scratches here and there, and the plaque commemorating the Great Naruto Bridge to the boy who had done the most for its completion. Gato was in jail, and likely would be for a long time. Naruto now wore his spare outfit, having burned his other one. The dried blood had been impossible to wash out, and the smell made it impossible to remain undetected while wearing it. Kakashi was worried about Naruto. No boy should be able to kill so casually. For someone who has never taken a life, he did it far too easily for it to be natural. I understand that he had a troubled childhood, but could it really have been so bad as to deaden his touch with reality? Or maybe it wasn't his first time killing. Kakashi had thought, at first, that it was just the Kyuubi that had allowed Naruto to kill like that. Kakashi had felt the Kyuubi's power during Naruto's fight with the other Mist Nin. But during the second fight, there had been no surge of demonic chakra, no overwhelming presence of evil. There had been no hint of any outside influence. And yet Kakashi knew that no untrained boy should be able to kill so quickly, and remain so calm about it afterwards. Naruto acted exactly as he had before the mission, running in circles and occasionally complaining about their slow progress toward Konoha. Kakashi would mention this to the Hokage privately. Maybe he would know something about it. Kyuubi sprinted through the forest, occasionally crossing paths with the group to make sure that they hadn't stopped. They did so every so often to tend to Sasuke's wounds. Kyuubi acted exactly as he had before. Why shouldn't he? He had killed thousands of people, probably tens of thousands. A few dozen more didn't even come close to the number of people he had killed in seconds before. But something was up. Kakashi was much more quiet than usual, and he glanced at Kyuubi a lot. He couldn't know, could he? Maybe you should have toned down the fight a little. No. It is easier to kill than to capture, and I was in a hurry to avoid being killed. But you could have run away, and then Kakashi would have no reason to suspect you. It's too late to worry about that now, kid. What has happened, has happened. And you need to get another outfit to replace the one you lost. That goes without saying, mortal. Naruto ignored the mortal comment. Kyuubi seemed to alternate between that and kid depending upon his mood. Naruto knew why Kakashi was suspicious. Kids weren't supposed to be able to kill like that. He had tried to explain it to Kyuubi, but the demon didn't care. To him, killing was as natural as whatever demons normally do. Kyuubi didn't see how it could be such a big deal. Naruto hoped that nothing would come of it. That's it for part 1. Thank you for watching and see you on the next video.